Plugin of the week is the FabFilter Pro Q2. Many of you may be familiar with the original Pro Q, and many of you may already have the FabFilter Pro Q2. It's really an amazing plugin because it's just, there's probably no better plugin I've ever seen for an EQ that has more flexibility, more features, better display, is as intuitive as it is, and sounds amazing. It really encompasses like almost everything that you would want in a plugin. A couple of the things that are new, and there are many things that are new about this particular plugin from the others, is that one, you'll have up to 21 bands of EQs, so you can really just kind of go nuts. It's very easy to create EQs, so rather than sort of having these preset sections with knobs, you just basically click on a section, drag, and you got yourself an EQ. And then there's loads of other things that you can do. You got undo, you got presets, you can copy and do A/Bing between different settings. There's a help menu that allows you to get to the manual and all those sorts of things. And you could toggle through presets and things like that, and save your own and all those other fun sort of things. Now, one thing that you can also do here is you can set the size of the display. And this is really cool because a lot of plugins don't have this ability. They even have a full screen feature, which allows you to set the screen all the way to the full size of the screen that you're watching on. So I'm not going to put it in full screen mode just because some of it may get cropped out in the video here, but just to kind of show you, it's really, really cool. It also, you have an amazing spectrum analyzer that's built into this. So when you're actually listening, you get like a nice, very accurate rendering of what's going on equalization-wise. And there's loads of different settings and ways you can do it. Like if you just wanted to zoom in on a particular frequency area, you can actually just click and drag and zoom in on a particular frequency area, so you can get very particular with what it is that you're doing. And I think that's kind of a really kind of cool, unique feature. You got meters along the right-hand side. You have the gain control thing. This is sort of a new feature that they've added in, where you actually, when you go beyond a certain amount of gain, it gives you up to 30 dB of gain. So it changes the scale based on how much you're actually boosting. So when you see it when you go past a certain amount, all of a sudden the screen will toggle, and now all of a sudden you can go down to 30 dB, which is pretty cool. So you got loads of options there. Now, what's really cool is, in addition to, there's so many things, I'm not even sure where to begin. You could click anywhere along the line, but there's some other options that you may not know about. Like, for example, if you just wanted to quickly create a shelving EQ for the low end or the high end, you just click anywhere on the line and drag to the left, and now all of a sudden you have a shelving EQ. And if you wanted to do a shelving EQ here, you could do the same thing. You just kind of drag in as you click from the line, and now you have a shelving EQ here. So this gives you some cool abilities and ways to control what's going on, just for creating it quickly. Now, a couple other setting options here. If I click down here on the display or double click, I automatically get a filter. So when you're clicking down here below the line, now I have this available to me. And from here, I can actually go up to 96 dB per octave, which is insane. It's almost like a brick wall filter kind of cutoff. So it gives you a lot of options. And what's really cool about this is that as I drag this up, in the filter, I can get a resonance that's sort of added in. So I can actually, even though technically on a filter there's no gain, you can actually put in a resonance by controlling the Q. So the Q, which is normally inactive for most filters, or it's quite often used to set the rate or order of the filter. So like each one of these 6, 12, 18, 24 is like a first order, second order, third order, fourth order, etc. filter by design. Some give you, like all different kind of variations, but the ability to sort of drag this around is really, really cool, because you can actually focus in on like the bottom end, like the low end of a kick drum, yet filter off the rumble that's kind of below it to give you like a nice, really tight sound. Very, very cool in terms of the way that you actually work with it. So there's also in addition to all of this, there's also some other unique features. I'm going to undo my way. Actually, I could just delete the band just by clicking there. There's also I'm going to show you this here. And there are several ways to get to it. I'm just going to right click here on this, and what I can do here is I can set the actual shape, the type of EQ. So I've got low shelf, low cut filter, high shelf, high cut filter. Those are all normal. You have a notch filter, and what this does is it will notch out a given set of frequencies. There are shortcuts, like if I'm on a Mac, so here in Pro Tools, if I command click, or I believe it would be control click in Windows, then I can narrow that Q to some insanely thin thing. So I can really, really focus in on it. What's really cool about this is that if I wanted to hear what frequency I was notching out, I can actually click on this little headphone icon. And what's cool is that if I drag upward, I can raise the volume of what it is that I'm focusing in on. So, and then notch out that particular frequency here, which is really cool. Another alternative option here, which is also a very handy one, is a bandpass filter. And what this does is the opposite. So it's the exact opposite of what we did there. So it's cutting off everything except for this particular range. Now, in addition to all of these different shapes, there's a new one which is called a tilt shelf. Now, a tilt shelf here, this is actually in its extreme mode. So what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to just drag the Q here. So when I set this up, what this does is it sets a, like you've seen me use this, if you've watched my videos, I sometimes use this as like a sort of bass treble kind of control thing here, where you're setting a sort of low shelf, and it could go either way, right? So if I pull it down here, it'll boost low frequencies and cut high frequencies. But you'll notice that there is an angle that this takes here, and I can obviously I can control that by command clicking again here, or working with the Q knob if I want to work with the Q knob here itself, right? And then I could get it to over resonate to really get that in, or I could get it to be very smooth. And this is like kind of a cool EQ type that's sort of unique. These types of like per octave sort of filters like that were used like in tape machines to balance out the inconsistency of the playback heads in terms of frequency response relationship. Very, very cool. So this is a new filter type that was sort of added in, which is kind of cool with this. So there's so many ways to use this. Let me just kind of go back here just to a standard bell shape and show you a few additional features that kind of work with this. So in addition to being able to adjust the Q, I can also right click here and set a slope. So this is sort of an unusual thing where you could set a slope in terms of the actual shaping of the bell curve. So there's a couple options here that I want to show you. So if I go to an extreme here, what it does is it makes it sort of this angle. So if you've seen some of the graphics where you see like you almost have this square kind of thing going on, you can actually really grab a very particular range of frequencies. And then, as you, work with your Q setting, you're basically focusing in exactly the area that you want to cut out or add in. This is going to kind of be a really, really, really cool way of working and, say, adding in like a note. Or taking out, like if a note is really low, you can literally focus in on an instrument, grab that note and raise the volume of that note without really affecting anything else around it. And it's pretty ridiculous. And what's really cool is that if you open up the piano keyboard down here on the bottom, then what happens is you drag this along, it actually switches between the different notes. So if you know exactly what that note is, you could just drag it right along the scale and, you'd say, hey, that's an A4. And then you could just add that note. Maybe that's one that's missing, or maybe that's one that was added in. And then you can kind of work with it from there. So cool. Now, there's a couple other things here which are kind of fun. If you hold the Option key or Alt key, it will lock in, like you noticed when I was moving it before, I was also changing the frequency inadvertently. So by doing this, I can lock in the frequency. So if my first movement is up and down, I can't have any left-right movement. If my first movement is left-right, then it will lock in the gain movement. And sometimes this is a very cool way of making sure that as you're sweeping frequencies are working things, that you're not creating any issues in terms of also changing the gain while you're kind of going along. So that's a really, really cool feature, which I've never really seen on any other EQ. It may exist someplace, that not that I know of. Now, when you work with this, you also open up a little bar down at the bottom here that allows you to turn the band on and off. So you have some options on that end. You can delete it here by hitting the X in the corner. You could change the shape here. You could change the rate per octave. Most of these I find are easier to get to when you're working with it on just using the control key or right-clicking. You could sweep the frequency. There's a difference here between working with the center of the knob. If you drag up and down here, then it will move through the individual notes. I'll just shut off the musical scale here. But if you grab here, then it'll work more radially. So you actually have to move your cursor around in a radial fashion. So depending upon which way you like, you can do it that way. The option key will automatically reset that. There's a very, very, very cool feature here that I want to show you, and this is a link between the Q and the gain control. Now, in certain types of filters, like API is most classically known for this, what happens is that as you boost more, the bandwidth will actually become narrower, and as you boost less, it'll become wider. And there's a slight variation here. Or here, like what you'll notice is that as I change the Q, when I widen it, there's less gain. So right now there's about 3 dB of gain. But as I narrow it, you notice that it gives it a boost, which kind of adds to the focusing nature. And this is a real analog style feature, which is kind of cool. So this linking, once you set it up, every time you create a new band, it will automatically enable that feature to be in. So you would have to shut it off. So it's kind of like almost like, hey, I prefer this kind of mode of working, and then you have the ability to kind of work with it that way. There's so many features here that are sort of ridiculous. You can also get into things where your left side is linked. You can work with just the left side or the right side, so you can actually have split the EQ and then have it so that, so for example here, now if I do this, I have the right side EQ, and let me just click on this here, so I can now separate it and actually make a slight adjustment of one to the other. So I can do a variation of the left or right EQ and make them independent of each other. So that is kind of a cool option. You can also work, in addition to this, you can work in mid-side mode, which is great for mastering. So this gives you the ability, if you split it, then to process mid signals independently of side signals. So you got like a lot of fun controls there. There are some other interesting features that are in here. Now there is a zero latency mode. So this is the most efficient way that the plugin actually works. There's also a natural phase mode, which is meant to match the phase distortion characteristics that you get with an analog EQ. And this will probably sound the most musical of them. And then you have a linear phase EQ. Now, depending upon what you set up here, when you go to the natural phase, you'll find that that the EQs have a little bit more of an analogish character. That might be the best way to describe it. Takes maybe a little bit more processing, or it's a little more latency involved with the actual setup of it, but not a lot. So that's actually pretty good. When you get into linear phase mode, linear phase EQs are always going to be create latency. The idea of linear phase is that when, and without getting into a whole long discussion about it, in a very simple way, what happens is that when you equalize a band, whether it's digital or whether it's in the analog realm, and the degrees will vary, whatever area that you are affecting, you're creating a slight delay and adding the gain within that frequency area. So when it's added in with the other elements, there's a phase distortion or some kind of a tonal coloration that can occur there. And sometimes that will vary based on the amount. So sometimes it sounds really awful. Like if you sometimes take like certain types of EQs and you boost like tremendous amounts, you get a phase distortion that really makes the sound really annoying. This sometimes happens with SSL EQs, channel strip EQs. or the old like E series or G series ones could sort of be like that at times. Now, with analog stuff, linear phase EQs, essentially what ends up happening is that there is meant to be no phase delay. And without getting into how analog linear phase passive EQs are designed, in the plugin realm, what happens is that when you actually boost and cut, they're very difficult to make, and they generate a lot of latency. The reason for this is that, especially when you're boosting low frequencies, you have to think about the total amount of time it takes for a low frequency waveform, say at like 30 cycles, so it's 30 cycles a minute. That means it's a complete cycle, I'm sorry, 30 cycles per second. That means that, when you start to divide that number into 1,000, you get 3 into 100, you get about 33 milliseconds. That's how long that wait to complete one full cycle. So in terms of processing lower frequencies, what happens is it takes longer to process that frequency area than it does to process higher frequencies. Where at 1K, it would be a millisecond for a complete waveform, if you get the basic formula there. And so as a result, when you start applying EQ in different bands in different areas, there's different timings involved with making those work. So the total gross latency of everything ends up being greater, because what you have to do then is you have to take whatever is going to create the longest amount of latency, and everything else is going to have to be delayed by that exact amount in samples in order for everything to line up and sound clear. So this would be more of a mastering or a mix bus type of thing. It's meant to be as transparent as possible, right? So you're not looking for any kind of analog character, and you can max out that processing, because generally with EQs like this, you can get very easily like artifacts, zipper noise, and other weird things kind of going on in the background, and the Pro Q is like really amazing at making that type of stuff not happen. Which is difficult and very cool. So, and also the flow of the actual interface when you're actually working with the settings is quite good as well, because normally, since there's so much latency for the actual processing to occur on some plugins, when you change the settings in that linear phase mode, it actually delays for a second, and then you hear the change. So you can't actually sweep it and hear what you're doing, which is kind of weird. So those different modes are really, really, really cool and something to learn about. You can also do a MIDI learn for assigning controllers to the different settings and all that sort of stuff. There's an analyzer section here, and there's a couple of cool features that I want to go over, because we can kind of go over this. The actual analyzer section, you could show pre and post, which is kind of cool. You could feed a sidechain signal in. So you could do a new feature which they added in called EQ match. So if you had, say, a master track and you were trying to match the EQ settings that were done maybe from a plugin that you didn't have, you could take that mix, feed it into the sidechain, and then this would match the settings of that, match the EQ settings from your current thing onto that. So I can't account for how good that is or not. Here I haven't really experimented with that type of thing. The tilt feature here gets to the characteristics. All these are display characteristics in terms of the range being like 0 to 90. You can make that 120 or 60. So you'll see your display out here. The tilt is kind of an interesting thing, because this is at this default setting, it actually lays out so that you hear frequencies more or less the way that we perceive them, sort of Fletcher-Munson style. So, as opposed to what they actually are. So, there are some things there that kind of get involved. There's a really, really other cool feature, which is called the spectrum grab. And I'm going to show you this because this is really cool. So if I'm working along this and I see like a particular frequency area here, you'll notice that as I move the cursor here, you'll see this white line. I can now grab onto this, and you can see that I'm actually now changing the spectrum analysis graph here, and then that adds an EQ in for that particular thing. So as I'm looking at the actual frequency graph, if I see that there's something in particular that's sticking out, I can just go in, pop onto that, see where that peak, whatever that exact frequency is, grab onto it, and it just sort of freezes there for me. Grab it and adjust it, and now I have the frequency here, and then I can accordingly, go in and, I had the frequency, and then if I do the right setting here, wait a minute, the wrong one. Is my shortcut working? Oh, wait a minute. Helps if I actually drag the right way to change the Q, right? So working with that, then I can kind of adjust my Q or whatever according. So that's like a cool way of kind of finding something along the way. Another very cool feature here, which is great, which I showed you with the notch filter, but you can also do here, is the headphone thing. This is really great because you can really solo in to find what it is that you're looking to boost or bring out. Again, you could bring the gain up or down by dragging up or down as you kind of drag across. And then whatever it is that you find, you can then, kind of mix that in. So really, really, really cool on that end. It's such an incredibly feature-rich plugin, and I probably missed like 40 features and different ways of doing things. But new features being the tilt EQ. There's also an auto gain setting, which is kind of cool. So as you come here, if you click auto gain, what it'll do is it will make up for the output gain based on how much you boost or attenuate. And so what it does is it sort of balances. So if you're doing fairly dramatic EQ, it's not going, in terms of boosts or attenuations, it's going to make sure that you're not just like adding an extra 20 dB of gain down the line. It'll actually balance that out, which is kind of cool. Phase reverse, which is kind of, which is fun. That just turns the meter off on the side in terms of level control. And this is just a global bypass. So if you have multiple bands kind of, in here at the same time, this would just be kind of a quick way, to just take them all out at the same time. You could also just bypass the plugin here. Lots of stuff on this. It's kind of, I thought about doing audio examples, but I'm not sure I could do it justice. There's so many incredible uses. If you started a mix with this, you could just show unique ways to use this plugin on almost everything, right through drums and almost every instrument. It's just, it's great sounding, incredibly flexible, such unique filter shapes and options that you can just have a blast using this one. And the Spectrum Analyzer is really an amazing tool for getting things done. All right, this is like maybe one of the longer plugin reviews that I've done, but given the breadth and depth of this type of plugin, is well worth it. FabFilter Pro Q2 is the plugin of the week.